Hello.
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 How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. Sorry for the absence. Some stuff came up that I needed to deal with.
No worries. Hope everything is okay.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. A little surprised to see you here, actually.
Yeah, I figured I missed what, 2 in a row. I probably should avoid more if I can.
Okay. Do we have any agenda items?
We don't. I just added the date.
I wanted to showcase the CNCF slides, but I have been busy, so I don't have the whole content ready to actually present. I was gonna work on it this like Tuesday and Wednesday, but I was just working on scoped enforcement actions. So
I mean, you can still share it, and we can give you feedback asynchronously.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, feel free to share it in the Slack channel, Jay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I should have been prepared, but it's just like
It's okay.
so
Yeah,
busy.
I mean, release is more important, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also because we want to get scope EA out, right? So,
Yeah.
sorry I didn't have a chance to review that PR right before this call, but I did review it yesterday.
Yeah, so I didn't see the comment that you left out on backward compatibility thing. So I'm making a change for that, and it should be I ready before EOD at least.
Nice. Yeah, I echoed Rita's comment. I just
Yeah,
put review
yeah,
comments like a couple of minutes ago.
yeah. So it's a tricky change because now I have to make changes in framework first to add that field into results and then carry it over onwards to gatekeeper. So it's taking a little bit of time.
Understood.
Yeah, sorry. I totally forgot there's a framework PR too. So I will look at that one today.
Sorry, before we change the topic, I don't know if you were gonna change topic, but I was looking at the results. I think you're talking about the response spec, right? Like I was actually looking at that and I thought we could get away with not updating that because that's internal, right?
Yeah, so technically the anything in the constraint framework is still a prototype, right? Like we're not, we don't want to like unnecessarily put whoever's depending on it through pains, but like breaking things for good reason, I think it's fine.
Yeah, well, sorry, what I meant was, could we still support backward compatibility for the status updates and the logs, all of that stuff without touching the framework, the response spec, right? Because response spec is what the code gets, but what the user sees is all in Gatekeeper, right? So could we support the extra new field in Gatekeeper without touching the response spec? Jay, you're shaking your head.
So I made that change in the origin. So I changed original result in framework. So that's why we cannot do it, because in original, the change I made on frameworks basically means that if there is a scoped enforcement action used, we don't receive a singular field saying, hey, the original constraint had scoped enforcement action defined. It's just an array consisting of deny, warn, or dry run. So there is no scoped, right? So when that comes in from the gatekeeper side, uh, in the enforcement action, it should show that whatever original enforcement action was there, not the computed one from scoped enforcement action. So that's why right now it's not possible, and I'm reverting that change on frameworks, so that I think onwards it should be possible, if that makes sense.
Kind of like, I'm curious what our backwards compatible solution is. Like, my first instinct is, well, scoped enforcement actions itself is a backwards compatibility thing, right? Like having an enforcement action of scoped. So why not just use scoped as the enforcement action for legacy status field?
So that's the thing, right? Like the framework changes I made doesn't return an actual string called scoped anywhere. Like
Right.
if it's scoped, it will compute the enforcement action and then return that enforcement action. So I need to make it so that in response we actually get scoped string as an enforcement action, and then additional field called scoped enforcement action with a list of enforcement action for a particular enforcement points.
Yeah, I'm thinking, what does this look like if we remove scoped in, like the singular enforcement action in the future, right? Because there is a potential world where we have like constraints v1, right? And we update the schema of constraints, right? Like that sort of design proposal is out there, which would get rid of the need for the singular enforcement action field altogether. But then maybe it's just you always just infer the enforcement action is scoped in the constraint framework, because constraint framework would need to still accept both types of constraints, right? The beta flavor and the v1 flavor. Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I would maybe like wordsmith the field, right? Should we call it scoped enforcement actions, or should we just call it enforcement actions, plural? You know?
Plural is confusing. Like I like scoped enforcement action. It just makes it more clear. It's just confusing for me personally to look at enforcement action and actions kind of thing.
So my challenge to you for that would be, if we remove ourselves from the picture, sorry, let me lower my hand here, and we think about the average user, right? And we think of the average user 5 years from now, let's say. If they see a field called scoped enforcement action, like, what does that mean? What is scoped, right? Like it's more clearly different for sure, but you're kind of putting a conceptual burden on them. Whereas if you have enforcement action, enforcement actions, right, you can kind of interpret those. That's a message that those fields are equivalent, right? Like one is the plural of the other.
So do we want to rename the scope? I get your point and it kind of makes sense, but we initially came up with this idea of scoped naming because right now in this current scenario, we don't have we still have that enforcement action spec field, and we don't want any more confusion on when what's defined, what is getting enforced. So that's why we came up with the scope, particularly scoped enforcement action as well, right? And only when at a global level the scoped enforcement action is mentioned, we utilize the field called scoped enforcement action and then enforce different actions for different points.
Right, and this is why I'm thinking about the next step rather than the immediate step we're taking, is because what I'm talking about right now is not the schema of the constraint, right? I'm talking about the like semantic log fields, right, or the pub sub events, those kinds of things. And so I'm thinking about if we have a V1 constraint, right, probably we would get rid of scoped enforcement actions and just call it enforcement actions, right? And so I was thinking maybe we could avoid having this same debate again, a year from now or whenever we get around to V1 constraints.
So what's the proposal here?
Oh,
The field in logging should be called enforcement actions and not scoped enforcement actions.
yeah, that's my
Basic.
thought. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Like I
have
haven't.
any. I don't have any objections towards that, but
Yeah, I think it's different, right? One is for
yeah,
the constraint author, one is for the like people who are parsing the results. So definitely different audience here. Yeah, I will say +1 on enforcement actions. I think that's what I said in the PR as well. So sorry if you already mentioned this, but what was the conclusion on whether or not we need to change the response spec? Do we need to add a new field, or can we just use the existing one?
I think well, okay, I'm forgetting if the constraint is included in the response or not. If the constraint is included, then we already have the data we need to determine if it was scoped or not. Like we can see if there's a singular enforcement action. If not,
second. I'm trying to look it up.
yeah.
I was just looking at this yesterday.
it doesn't seem like no constraint is not included. Oh wait, it is included.
Response in the results. Yeah, constraint
Yeah.
is there. So there's target, message, metadata, constraint, enforcement action. I'm talking about the results type, right? The struct.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me back up a little. Do we want this to be feature gated, right? We want this to be feature gated, right?
I would think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, if people don't want it, they could just not use it.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't
Then
know
it
if
will
this needs
be
to be
an empty
feature-gated.
field in the logging, right? Like it would just sit there without any data.
Right.
Yeah, like sorry, go ahead, Rita.
Right. The if you don't have anything, you don't, the new field wouldn't have any value. But I was thinking of how do we, let's say when I'm debugging this, like how do I know, like if the enforcement action in the results, if it's coming from the old one or it's coming from scope enforcement action, how would I be able to identify that?
Well, enforcement action singular would say scoped.
Good point. Yes. But that's a new action. In terms of backward compatibility, it's an unknown action that users will have to handle now.
Right, but that was always
That-
the intent. Yeah.
Fair. So then we do want to update the results spec, sounds like.
Wait.
I'm
How
still
did,
not
we
clear.
said that having the constraint gives us in the results field gives us all the data we need to do everything we're suggesting.
Mhm.
So was there something else that you
Well, so
heard?
today Jay is basically taking, he made enforcement action an array of strings, right?
Mm.
So he actually changed that. I realized like too late. Well, not too late. It's never too late. And so do we want to keep that as a string, and or are we okay with, like, for backward compatible, again, results is internal, right? Users don't actually touch results. It's how you interpret results. That's user facing. Right? So yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
So the reason,
What's that?
sorry. So the reason, I think reason behind me changing that spec field was to so there is a constraint match result struct here somewhere. Wait, so right now what we are changing is, instead of determining the enforcement action in query function, we are changing it under review, and so that's why we need to maintain a separate map with constraint, because to match it after we get the responses and then backfill the enforcement action. So there needs to be a change in constraint match result struct, and that's why I changed the results struct to string array rather than string in enforcement action.
I'm okay either way, to be honest. Like if we want to have, like, I think what you said is we replaced enforcement action with enforcement actions and just got rid of enforcement action, which is a breaking change, but I'm fine with it because constraint framework is a prototype. The other option that I think Rita was considering is, should we leave enforcement action and also have enforcement actions in the review object or the results object? Is that right, Rita? I'm also fine with that. Like,
Either way, you're fine.
yeah.
Okay. What's easier, Jay, since you're implementing?
I mean, I'm halfway through adding the enforcement action back in the framework's PR anyways, so I can just push that change.
Okay.
Cool.
So in terms of the constraint match thing that you were talking about, so instead of
it will have both the fields, like the string of scoped enforcement action, array of a scoped enforcement action for enforcement points in case when they match, and enforcement action as an original enforcement action string.
Okay.
Sorry, this is so confusing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I like the idea of not recomputing the same thing again and again if we are getting as a part of result
True.
directly. So
That's true. Yeah. That way you don't have to call the same thing over and over. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, hope that helps block you.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general, like, always think about whatever thing we're adding, always think about what the existing thing, if the user doesn't do anything, will the existing thing just work as is? Always ask yourself that. because it needs to be.
Yeah.
This is why we have tests, right?
I wish.
And so what
there
is the
was
order of operations for the release then?
Order of operation.
Yeah, like J updates the framework's PR,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Yeah.
we review it, and then we add to gatekeeper.
Yeah.
And we do the separate PR, or do we want to do it in the same scope EA PR?
So yeah, I'm gonna do it in the same scope DAPR.
Okay, so
Because it
you're going to do
hasn't
the
merged yet.
rendering of frameworks in that same PR.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
and then we are holding on the 1.30 bump,
Yeah.
and then we are okay with the
We're
OPA
concerned.
version. Correct.
Well, OPA version, didn't we bump to the latest 66?
Let me
I thought I remember I had a PR. Oh, I updated the Dependabot PR.
Yes, but did we? Oh, but we
We
didn't.
haven't brought it into Gatekeeper.
Oh, okay. So they'll come with the J's PR then.
That's right. That's right.
Cool.
Well, J's Gatekeeper PR is using the latest, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't merged yet, so it'll when we merge, it'll be the latest one.
I'm saying J's Gatekeeper PR is using the latest framework, right? So we should know that all the changes in framework should work.
Yeah. So once we merge it in frameworks, they'll bring the OPA in too.
Yeah. Cool. Anything else?
Any other PRs that we need to get in?
I was updating CI testing version for Kubernetes, but like it's a minor one. Rita already LGTM'd it, so if we are fine with it, I can merge that PR as well.
This is just the CI, right? The one
Yeah. Just CI.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is fine. Oh, and we can also drop 1.26 is end of life.
Okay, I'll remove it.
Hold on.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we wanted to remove it, so yeah, whatever. And then I think Davis has one that's outstanding. It's pretty small PR, I think. And then there was another PR someone opened just now about adding support for Connect operations. Anyone has a concern about that? Like, do we want to wait or do we want to merge this?
I think if it's optional Helm only, that I'm not concerned about it.
Yeah.
But if it's like a regular part of it, the gatekeeper, we should discuss.
Mm-hmm.
Does it connect? Would that be to a sub-resource of pod? It would need to be.
It seems like it's executed in exec, maybe?
It's not sub-resource to your question.
Yeah.
All right, so oh yeah, what's the difference between exec and connect? Like, what does connect mean? Is it like port forward?
I think you need connect for exec to work, I guess.
Connect is the verb, and then exec is the command.
I see. Oh, I thought we already had done that like years ago.
I thought so too. This was kind of surprising to me.
What, supporting connect?
Yes.
Well, I thought that we had specifically, couldn't remember the connect bit, but dealing with running commands on pods. I thought we had specifically done something about that like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think that was exec. I think that's where the confusion is, I think.
Exec options?
Yeah, there's these ones. So these are ones what we have. Like pods, ephemeral containers, pods exec. So it's kind of, I'm not sure why connect is one of them.
Oh, actually, in an old issue, someone did ask for it. Add connect to operations list, set resources to */*, but we just didn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, */* might be a little scary. Yeah, I'm curious what connect does if it's not related to exec.
Oh, wait, this is under operations. Sorry, I think I was confused.
Connect request is the resource that will be validated.
Connect request, you said?
Sorry, connect request is a resource that needs to be validated. This guy. I'm just looking at an old issue.
But today we have pods exec and pods log. So that means they're not working without connect them.
Oh wait, you said it's a red herring. Scroll down to read more.
What is a red herring?
Oh, sorry. Let me paste the link to that issue.
Okay, yeah. So this is what I thought. So we have the pods exec today, but without connect, does that mean it's not working?
Oh, but this guy says I updated resources to star and kubectl exec, but still not seeing kubectl exec mentioned above being blocked.
Oh,
Okay, wait. I had to specifically call pos exec engage resident for the resources. Oh, okay, so then it worked for him. Yeah. That's interesting. Okay, and I think that's when we added the sub resources, right?
correct. But we didn't add connect.
Right, but this guy seems to say it worked for him.
Oh, without connect?
Yeah, like here.
Oh,
This is what I'm talking about. Putting it in the chat. And that makes it work. He created a gist for it. Yeah, maybe we don't need that.
I mean, no, I mean, then it is operations is star. That's all operations. I mean, that obviously includes connect.
No, but the rules he had. Where do you see star/star? Oh, operations. Sorry.
Operation star. So that's
Oh,
the
I
create,
see.
update, connect, that sort of stuff.
I see. Sorry, I missed that. I only saw pos/exec there.
Yeah, so we do have that today, the resources pod slash exec. But I don't think it is actually doing anything because we don't have connect.
Interesting. So that has never worked then?
I think so.
How does anything work? Well, we could test this real quick. Anyway, so sounds like we don't have concerns, right? As long as it's optional, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Anything else?
I did not realize I was muted the whole time, but I agree with what happened. So
Yeah. Actually, there was a PR. I think you had LGTM, but then I think you have some concerns. I just want to double check. It was
which PR is this?
the generate. Oh, why can't I find it now?
That's we closed it. yesterday.
was merged.
We merged it.
You merged it. Okay. You're right, it's already merged because we all GTM. Yeah.
Yeah, like I for me that was just I was wondering, you know, there's kind of two roads to go here, as I was saying in that comment. Like one way is to just like put everything in the user's hands, right, and say, user, you're responsible for configuring your enforcement actions correctly. If you try to create a binding for a non-existent validating admission policy definition, that's on you, right? The other way of doing it is to basically only create the binding if we expect to be creating a definition, right? So like if the constraint template says I should create a definition, and if the constraint template has a VAP cell source. And it's kind of like two competing concerns, right? Because on the one hand, it's like nice to hold the user's hand in that way, right? But it does increase the kind of like Rube Goldberg machineness of the whole process, right? Because you have multiple eventually consistent processes kind of like relying on each other to work. So we needed to make sure, for instance, that we reconcile all constraints, both when the constraint itself changes, but also when the underlying constraint template changes, for instance, because that may have affected the definition generation behavior. So my initial hesitance was like, we kind of were moving away from fancy behavior. Let's like keep moving away from fancy behavior. But I also saw like the bad UX problem, right? And so eventually I was just like, you know what, if the fancy behavior winds up being problematic, we can add a flag or something and let people adjust things that way. What was that?
Let people decide what they are willing to live with. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's fine for now. Let's see, right? Kind of reminds me of that thing that Davis just added. It's like, break me if I'm not ready yet. What could go wrong? Okay, cool. I think just personally, like I just didn't. It felt really dirty to have like unused resources in the clusters.
Yeah. But yeah, it also like avoids race condition type considerations. I didn't honestly game out the edge cases far enough to know if, you know, there's some really niche edge case where you'll get some unexpected behavior. I don't think so.
Yeah. Cool. I actually need to drop, but you guys can continue if you need to. But it was great to see y'all. And ping us for reviews, Jay. Want to unblock you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Right, bye.
Bye.
Do we have anything else in the agenda?
Doesn't look like it.
Hey folks, I always forget to fill out the agenda. That's like the rules here, right? You fill out topics you want to talk about. Is that like the kind of structure of these calls?
Yeah, I mean, we're not super formal about it.
Okay. No, I'll try to remember next time. Yeah. If there's nothing else, just kind of two things. Gatekeeper consumer here, right? So we I kind of wanted to get your opinions or kind of thoughts on upgrading Gatekeeper, right? We don't fully follow the upstream Helm kind of layout that you guys have implemented. But when upgrading Gatekeeper and there's, let's say, a pretty significant change in one of the CRDs. The way I understand CRDs and like, you know, the custom resources that reference it or depend on them, you kind of have to wipe out the CRDs, which will eventually delete the custom resource that's like using it, which can cause issues with that instance of the resource. To get the new CRD applied into the cluster and then ultimately recreate the resources against the new CRD. Is that?
You should not need to delete CRDs
Okay.
to apply a newer version of a CRD. Like, I could see maybe people getting into that position. Like there's some edge cases here that Gatekeeper, at least to date, as far as I'm aware, have avoided, right? Because I can imagine if you made a change to a CRD that was like a fundamentally incompatible change. So, and what I mean by that is like, let's say you have like 3 fields, right? Field A, spec.A, spec.B, spec.C.
Yeah.
Right. If I update my CRD to add a spec.F, let's say, that's not a problem, right?
Okay.
Because that newer CRD is a super set of the older CRD, right?
Gotcha.
What I don't know how Kubernetes would handle is what happens if you were to, say, remove spec.a when you were updating and you had some pre-existing data on the cluster that had spec.a. I assume that the data persisted on etcd would not change, right? Which is Kubernetes internal storage. And so you would have this data with spec.a inside of it. Whether it would be, this A field would be deleted on read, whether it would cause some sort of data set consistency error, that I don't know.
Okay. Okay. No, I think that helps because I'm going to run through some good testing and just wanted to understand how maybe you guys were handling it. And I think in your change log, if there were anything like breaking from a previous CRD, you guys would call it out or highlight it to make sure the new version is capturing that.
Yeah, and I don't think that's ever happened, or if it has happened, it's been like once or twice, and it's like slipped under our notice.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. The only other thing was related to Gator. Is that under your kind of jurisdiction? With Gator testing, right? And I understand the concept of it, of testing your constraint templates with constraints. How would you guys view it with people who are, you know, writing their source Rego files and unit tests in Rego, and there's folks that are saying, well, Gator can now, you know, get me away from having to write Rego unit tests because I can test the functionality in a, you know, constraint with Gator. Was that the intention? Is Gator kind of hover, like, you don't have to write unit tests anymore for Rego, but because you have this new framework per se.
Yeah, I mean, Gator has a few subcommands, right? So like effectively running gatekeeper policies on proposed changes as like a git pre-commit hook was one use for Gator. That's one subcommand. But yeah, the specifically this Gator, I believe it's test subcommand, or maybe it's Gator verify. Sorry, I need to double check. The intent behind that command was a couple fold. One, it was that if you try to mock out your data in Rego, it's kind of hard to do because you need to figure out how to generate a Kubernetes admission request, basically, right? And so the data looks a little different than the object, and this was a way of letting people avoid that complexity. The other reason for it, particularly now, is I don't know if you've heard of validating admission policy.
I just haven't used them.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So one impact that validating admission policy is having on Gatekeeper is we're working on supporting constraint templates written in cell code that can be used to basically generate validating admission policies. So you could use validating admission policy in place of a webhook, but you could still use the Gator command. You could still run audit with policies. Sorry, yeah?
No, I said got it. I see what, yeah.
And so one benefit of Gator-based tests is if we have something written in Rego and we want to also have the same source code in validating admission policy, which it turns out is kind of complex to keep those in sync, but kind of necessary, at least for a migration step, we can run the same tests regardless of which language we're using.
I see. Cool. Okay. Fair enough. I think in our space, we've been able to, in just using Rego and Rego unit test functionality, capture the requests as an admission review coming into the cluster. So we haven't had trouble, and we've had lots of confidence writing that and seeing the results before we apply. So just wanted to, kind of understand that intent. Okay.
Yeah, if you use Rego unit test, you'll be able to test much more granular pieces of the code, right?
And that's exactly, yeah. Because Gator wasn't giving me, like, if the rules or the policy document was pretty complex, and I really wanted to understand, but where did it really fail? Or is it manipulating the way I expect? I don't see a way to do that with the Gator, tooling.
Yeah, correct. Like the Gator testing is sort of by design ignorant of like any language nuances.
Got it. Perfect. Okay. Thanks, guys. But one last question, if I can. You guys here seem to be the core group that I always see on the community call. So you guys are the de facto maintainers of Gatekeeper?
Not just de facto. We're just the maintainers.
The maintainers. Okay. And I wanted to join the working group policy community call at different times. You're separate because I guess the question is why are you guys separate, if it's still policy or I don't know if you guys have the answer to that.
Kubernetes policy working group, is this?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. So Gatekeeper is its own project. It's like part of OPA, which is a CNCF
correct
graduated project. So it definitely has its own meetings, whereas the working group, someone interrupt me if I'm wrong here, but I think it's more of like a standards body kind of thing where people dream up sort of universal policy concepts that maybe become Kubernetes interfaces, maybe go straight into Kubernetes. Is that accurate, Sirtash, would you say?
Yeah, I sort of. I mean, so the working group is just like a working group for and there's the SIGs, and then SIGs are more like that sort of.
Yeah,
more
I only
than
asked because I saw a lot of
I-
Carverno being discussed in that working group and thought, well, where's Gatekeeper in this mix? But I know we have this call specific.
Yeah,
to
I think
Gatekeeper.
we participated in the past, but we haven't done it in a while. I don't see a reason why not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just curious.
Yeah, it's time probably.
Yeah, right. Cool. Yeah, because our company is trying to start contributing more to these open source, ecosystems, and like I'm fairly new to how everything's set up, and especially CNCF and Kube world. So just interested in how you guys organize and set up.
Yeah, I think SIGs are like the core groups
Yeah.
for Kubernetes.
Right.
Working groups are more informal and more temporary.
Yeah.
And then like various projects like OPA or like what's another project? Sorry, I'm blanking. Open
Maybe
open
Envoy.
telemetry. Sorry, go ahead.
I would say maybe Envoy. I don't know if they have their own.
Perfect.
But
Yeah. So they will have their own individual governance structures, right?
Gotcha.
And you can view gatekeepers, for instance, in the OPA repo. I believe there's a governance markdown file, and you can sort of see the rules that they're operating by. Kubernetes has its own as well.
Yeah. Okay. Cool stuff. All right.
Yeah.
That was it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And do we have anything else we want to talk about?
Nothing from me.
All right. Shall we call it?
Yeah.
Right. Have a good day.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.